Welcome everyone to Visionary Psychics. I'm Sara Wiseman, and we are so blessed to have with us here today one of our visionary psychics, Krish Surroy. So, Krish, welcome
Hey
to
Sarah,
this little program that we're doing.
thank you, thank you. It's great
Yeah,
to be here. It's great to see you.
yeah, you too. Well, you're all the way across. What do they say, across the pond in the UK, and
That's the one.
I'm here. Yeah. So I don't even know how we met. I have no idea, but I'm so glad we did. And I wanted to talk to you about you've been doing this work for a very long time, and I
Mm,
wanted to talk to you about kind of how you came. I guess I want to talk to you especially about how you came to know that you had these intuitive gifts. Like, how old were you when you started to go, whoa, what was that? And just kind of what your experience was like. Because I didn't really know I had any gifts until I was far into adulthood. I had the gifts, but I didn't know that I had them. But what was your experience?
yeah, thank you. I was one of those archetypal kind of, young starters who then kind of like fell off the wagon, as it were. So I remember I lived, my mum still lives in the house that I grew up in. So they bought it back in 1966, and the house is built on marshland that's been reclaimed. And so there are lots of spirits in the marshes. There's like an ancient fort close by, and apparently ladies of the night used to cross from the local villages to go and visit the soldiers, and many of them drowned. So I used to
Ah,
see and feel spirits all around me when I was like 2 or 3 years old. I remember my dad worked on kind of night shift and wanted me to go and switch the water heater on for him before he went off, and I meant going upstairs in the dark, and I was petrified because I could feel, things up there, as it were. And that was really early, 3, 4, 5 years old, kind of thing. And of course, it was dismissed. It was like just my imagination and all that kind of thing. And and then of course, it kind of got squished out of me, as it were. And that's just what happens, right? And then
right.
I think the next time it sort of came back, I was at kind of high school, probably about 16, 17, and I had a friend who was very clear she was psychic, and we just kind of we were like a pair of magnets, as it were, and she started to kind of saying to me, "Well, I see this around you, and I see that around you, and that kind of thing." And gradually, it freaked me out at first, but gradually I started to kind of catch the shadows out of my eyes and start to see orbs around people and that kind of thing. So it sort of came back around about 17, and yeah, so it was early.
Yeah. And kind of you had the experience that a lot of people have where there wasn't any language for it. It was dismissed. Nobody said, "Oh, Krish, you're seeing departed spirits." It was just like, "Don't talk about that," or "That's not real." It was just, and so then you're left with what you see and know, and then what you're told is that that doesn't exist, which is
Right.
confusing as a child. Yeah.
Completely confusing. And one of the first experiences when I was around 17 was playing around as you do as teenagers. Where I grew up, there's a lot of Wicca, that kind of stuff. And I remember I was at high school, but we were in music club and we were staying late, and we decided to do a seance. Like a
Right,
very,
right.
very Buffy, the Vampire Slayer kind of thing, as it were. But one of my friends, there were four of us. One of my friends, a girl called Joe, she actually started kind of rocking back and forth and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, we didn't know about boundaries or energetic limitations or that kind of thing. So there was actually a thing where she started hyperventilating and stuff. So it was, I mean, looking back now, I would call it something like I don't know, it'd be sort of dramatic, say possession, but there was definitely something going on. But of course, it was like this kind of, I've got no language around this. We're playing
Right.
around, and this is heavy. This is
Yes.
dark, and that was at
Yeah.
17, so it was even more like, don't talk about this stuff. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
so yeah, it was interesting. It was
What
interesting.
What do you think about so as you know, I live in Oregon in the US, so that's a
Mm,
very um in terms of like the layers of departed people around, there are the indigenous people who lived here,
mm,
but even then it's like very sparse. It would have been very sparsely populated.
Mm.
Whereas you live in a place that I like with so much history
Oh
stacked on
God,
it.
yeah.
Yeah, like how is that? How do you, when you're seeing departed, it must seem like they're just everywhere. Is that the case for you, or what do you experience?
No, it's a really good. Well, two things I'd say to that. Number one, even though the departed are part of my experience, that doesn't tend to be the channel I am
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
I tune to, or the frequency I
Right.
tend to tune to so naturally. But the other thing is, I've had to really learn to and like work with my kind of guide team, as it were, to almost really shut them out. Because you're right. I mean, I live in a 19th century cottage right now, but where I grew up, the town I grew up in was a Saxon village
Hmm.
originally. So
Yes,
it
right.
went back to like the 8th century. So it growing up, like with that kind of experience, it was like it was like being on a crowded train at times. There would be
Hmm.
so many departed around that it was overwhelming. So I had to learn to put up very, very strong boundaries. And even now, because there's so much around, it's like I don't really generally experience them unless I invite them in,
Right.
um, because it's so dense, as you say.
Yeah, it's like we have to choose almost like what channel we're in. And I really appreciate that you said, um, like for so many of the folks doing this visionary psychics programs that we've been doing, their focus is mediumship, and um, then also this other option. Well, there's lots of other options, but the option that you tend to work in quite a bit is with the guide realm. And tell me
Mm.
how that, I guess, do you remember your first experience, or how has that changed for you over the years, like who you're working with and how you work?
Great question, thank you. I do. The first thing I remember were kind of my angels, the guardian angels, and my understanding of it. I mean, we have many, but my understanding is having two. We all have two guardian angels. Sort of a physical one. So for me, that's Cassandra, and she is like this big kind of 7 foot tall kind of Amazon, kind of with a scythe, and she's like proper warrior. And then I have Evelyn, who is like this much more elven like, but kick ass as well. And I remember when I was everything seemed to happen when I was 17 actually. Um, but the first time I encountered them was when I was about 17, and I was in this situation where unfortunately it led to me basically being beaten up on the street, which wasn't good. But my first experience of them was actually them both coming in about 2 minutes before it happened, just going, "No, don't go that way."
Hmm. Hmm.
And I was like, it's like just this feeling of these two being there, and of course I'm like, what? you know, what? Don't be daft. I'm hearing voices or whatever else, and so I carried on walking, and like there it was, and I literally, I mean, it wasn't pretty.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
so, but what that did mean was it was like, oh, okay. So once I kind of got past the initial trauma, it was like, oh, okay. So who?
Yes.
So
Yes.
so that was kind of my first encounter with them, and kind of gradually, you're right. I do a lot of work more in the realm of like human guide, or guides that
Hmm.
have been human or have a soul or that
Hmm.
kind of thing. And so I encountered my kind of primary guide probably, or my life guide probably about the age of 21, 22, and then started kind of started having visitations from ascended masters
Yes.
fairly quickly. So that's kind of the realm I tend to kind of tune in on. It's kind of like, because a lot of my work is around people's life purpose or the reason for being, and very deep stuff. I'm not the psychic who's going to tell you you're going to meet the love of your life at the bakery at 3 o'clock on a Friday.
Right.
That's not me. It's that deeper soul calling.
Yeah.
And so over the course of several months, Merlin showed up, and Saint Germain showed up, and gosh, I'm trying to think. Mary showed up at various times and that kind of thing. And there's this like hit parade of,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Yeah. And sometimes in this work, like when people will get like such highly elevated guides as say Mary or Jesus, and they're like, how could I get that guide? It's too big, or
Mm,
maybe they're non-Christian and then they get Mary or Jesus, or and the way I think about it is, um, those guides are so ascended, they have the ability to go to lots of people, like they have the ability to work with lots of us, and like we can, like
absolutely.
I also share Merlin with you, so
Mm.
that's another example, like a guide that can go to lots of people. So you were pretty young. Like I didn't start getting guides until I was in my early 40s, which please
Mm.
everyone stop doing math and don't try to figure out. But you were really young, so you didn't even have like a whole lot of, I mean, probably you didn't have a whole lot of life experience yet because you were just so young. And so here this team came to sh- give you advice and help mentor you and help guide you. And do you feel like you listened at that young, or was
No, don't be daft.
it?
No, it was like having a bunch more parents telling
Yeah,
me
yeah,
what to do, and it was like,
yeah,
you know, and as it was like this kind of hit parade of like them coming along. It's like, you know, part of the reason I think they showed up so early was kind of almost go, you know, we're it's a weird thing to say about like ascended masters, but almost to say like we're just normal people. We're just
right,
like, you know, we're just like
right,
you. We're just kind of a bit further up the curve, kind of
along,
thing.
right.
So no, for me during my 20s, it was just like a cool thing that I was exploring, and
Yeah, yeah,
I wasn't even really doing, you know, readings. I was kind of exploring shamanism a lot and druidry and a lot of the earth-based stuff.
hmm,
So Merlin was kind of cool because he played into that, but you
yeah,
know, Mary not so much because, you know,
right,
different
right, yeah,
paradigm and all that kind of
right,
thing.
yeah,
And then you bring angels into it, and it all goes. I think so. No, it took me. So you're right. I was young, but it took me a long time to actually kind of get a sense of respect and
yeah,
perspective, and because I think I was such a conformist teenager in many ways that I sort of like rebelled in my 20s, kind of thing, and you know,
yeah,
the guides kind of got the brunt of that as well, as it were.
yeah, yeah. It's almost like this gift was there, but like even the deep respect and humility and gratitude I have for the guides now is way different than when I was just starting, like, oh, this is amazing, you know. So
Yeah.
you work with people in a super, like a super hardcore professional level, like
Mm.
professional style people. Have you noticed, and you also work with people who are deeply interested in this kind of realm,
Mm.
have you noticed that things are changing? Like the more businessy people are becoming more open. What have you noticed, like in working with those
Mm.
two groups that seem kind of different, but maybe aren't that different at all?
And they're really not that different
Hmm.
in many ways. Um, Things are definitely more open in terms of even just using the language. There's more crossover these days, you know. So I remember kind of 20 years ago, we would never use words like energy in the.
Hmm. Yeah.
Whereas now it's like no one bats an eyelid, you know.
Hmm.
So I might not wander into a CEO's office and start talking about, you know, archangels and that kind of thing. Uh, but I'll tell you a story in a second where I did kind of did. But the people I tend to work with are, I mean, we would in our syntax would call them light workers or people on a mission, earth angels, that kind of stuff, and you know but that verbiage doesn't work for everyone, as it were.
Hmm. Hmm.
So the hardcore professionals I work with tend to be change makers or mission driven people, but they might not just talk in that language, as it were.
Yes.
But they're very intuitive.
Hmm.
They just don't necessarily identify individual guides and all that kind of thing. But
Hmm.
very often I'll be with them and I can see them, you know. So I remember there's like a hardcore entrepreneurial big name called a guy called Gary Vaynerchuk,
Hmm.
and his chief heart officer, who is like his chief HR person, is a friend of mine. She's very spiritual. I remember the moment I met her, I just like Archangel Azrael was stood behind her,
Hmm.
and he just said, "You need to tell her that I'm here." I'm like, this is like
but
really high powered, like
yeah, yeah,
and I just was like, I
yeah,
don't know
yeah,
where this is coming from, but Archangel Azrael stood next to you,
yeah,
and she was like, oh my god, and it just we were straight
yeah,
in,
yeah, 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 yeah,
and it was amazing. So you know that kind of thing of like, no matter what your head says, just trust it.
yeah,
It's like
yeah,
that's that's been a hard fought lesson. So yeah, so when they show up and like the person looks really hardcore, non-spiritual, they show up and say, you know, you need to kind of mention us or talk about this or talk. I have to listen to it, and
yes.
yeah, there's a massive curiosity as well about that in the seemingly professional people, as it were.
Yeah, well, people that are in um higher positions that are doing good,
Mm,
they they do come in with this sense of mission, like you're saying, or this dropping in as a soul to do this particular piece of contribution, to what we're all here to
mm,
contribute. Um,
absolutely.
that reminds me, so I don't even know why I'm going to say this, but
Hmm.
I'm going to go for it too. So it's also interesting how guidance can come in events. Um, so my dad's been passed for a long time, and the other day I was at my mom's retirement home, and we were getting onto the elevator, and there was this elderly gentleman there, and
Mm.
I could. It wasn't my dad; he's passed for 20 years, and it was as if my dad. It was so similar to my dad, and he said this little joke with the same timing as my dad, and the same, his hands look like my dad, and it was a message from my dad, um taking the form of this other person, this
Yeah.
event, this, being in the elevator, just three people together. Yeah, and so like it's not only that the guides are coming in, but the universe is creating or finagling all of these particular
Mm.
events to give us understanding and guidance, um, and it's really quite remarkable, like when you start to look at your life of like all the synchronicities.
Oh God, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, and like even during a time that you and I have known each other, you a little while ago just went through this super accelerated stage of movement where you moved your house, and
God, yeah.
I remember thinking like it's like sometimes as a psychic, and you know this too, like you'll see something for somebody and it'll be so fast and so unbelievable, and then it'll just happen exactly like that, like how could this be possible, and yet there it was. And um I think that that's always the fun of it, but also um sometimes we just have to blurt out what we receive and let it be discovered by the other person
Let,
as it's going to be
yeah.
discovered. Yeah.
Let's share the reality of that story there, Sarah. I think I spoke to you on the Tuesday or something like that. You did a reading for me and said about this kind of move that was coming. And I think it, and I was like, no, it'll be in a few
No.
months. And like literally 2.5 weeks later, I signed a lease at a house in the country when I was living in the city. So,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. You know, you were like, yeah, it's going to happen. And I'm like, a few months. And you're like, no, I think it's really going to happen now. 2.5 weeks.
Yeah.
That was a roll. That was a runaway train. That was.
Well,
Um,
yeah, and sometimes, like from working with your clients, like
mm,
sometimes when we're ready to move, it it just it just happens. And like we won't talk about this too much on our recording today because it'll not be relevant later, but like just like tomorrow is this big lunar eclipse,
mm,
and those are the kinds of events. Sometimes it's astrological, sometimes it's just all the elements are ready, and very fast movement, and so life is surprising that way. It's just interesting that
oh
way.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. You know, one of I'm kind of quite animistic in my beliefs. This notion that
Yeah.
everything has a spirit, and you know, I remember there was this book I read once by a guy called Parker Palmer, who's a Unitarian Universalist, called "Let Your Life Speak,"
Hmm.
and it's almost like um, if everything has a spirit in a way, it really is like not let your life speak, but let life speak to you. Because
Yes.
I think you know we're in constant communication, right? It's like literally just how much do we listen?
Yeah.
Um, and as you say, that listening can come in the form of synchronicities, of guidance, of other people in the elevator, you know. But it's always there. It's just the degree to which we're open to hearing it, I
Yeah.
guess.
I'd love for you to speak a little bit about the nature and the nature shamanism and the
Mm,
druid or whatever aspect of that is coming to mind. Kind of like the location you're in is so unique to that work, like it's so
mm.
associated with that work. And what kind of things do you enjoy working with in those pieces of the puzzle?
Yeah, thank you. Um, yeah, as you say, where I am, I was really needing to be in nature. It was like so part of my soul. And one of the things that I think we've all noticed during the kind of whole pandemic thing is this call back to coming out of our concrete boxes and kind of going into nature. You know, even whether that's going to parks if you live in the city, that kind of thing. And of course now climate change is huge, and there's all this kind of thing. So I think there is this energetic trend towards pulling us back to our core nature. Um, so, you know, I do a podcast which you've been a guest on called The Sacred Wild. And for me, it is about reclaiming that fundamental sacred wildness that we have, because we live
Mm-hmm.
in ways in which we're so conformist. It's like, I think Don Miguel Ruiz in the Four Agreements calls it the domestication of the human spirit.
Ah, yeah.
So for me, that kind of connection with nature, and it might be anything as basic as nature connection of just going into the forest and just sitting there and being with the, being with the plant people, or that kind of thing, and just being just being not necessarily even in communication, but just being in community.
Yes.
Um, it kind of when I go and do that, it kind of moves me into a different state. It moves me into a much more wide open state, and I'm aware of the more than human world. Which,
Yes.
so for me, I mean, I do get I do shamanic journeying. I do kind of shamanic healing with people. Um, I work with the eightfold year, as we call it, in the Celtic calendar, which is basically it's a way of observing the seasons and all that, but marking eight ceremonies that
Hmm.
um, the ancient Celts reputedly kind of followed, as it were. And that is all about, again, being more in our natural rhythms, our natural state, our kind of wildness, because we are so disconnected from our environment these days.
And it's not about, sometimes people talk about, oh, we're humans, we're animals. That is true. But what you're talking about is um, nature as a spiritual community, the
Mm,
plant people, the weather entities, um, the trees as spiritual community and kind
hmm.
of joining in congregation with spiritual community as, yeah, which is a different way of
Absolutely.
looking at things. And it's funny because even a person that really rejects all of this that we would be talking about, if you were to go pop them into nature for even 20 minutes, they would immediately have this sense of relaxation,
Hmm.
opening, maybe emotions would come. It's like our true essence comes forward when we're in that vibrational
Absolutely.
level. Yeah.
Absolutely. You know, I did some training once with Sonia Choquette, and one of the things she
Mm.
said was that nature resonates at the vibration of unconditional love, and I think
Ah,
that's entirely true. And it is
yeah.
that thing of, as you say, anyone's. And the great thing is, much like a lot of spirituality, science is now beginning to catch up and is beginning to measure the effects of going into nature and all that kind of thing. And we even I remember during kind of beginning of the year, the BBC in a primetime Sunday evening slot, there's this program called Country Fire, and it's usually about like farming and the country, and it's all about the healing power of nature, like
Right.
forest bathing, all that kind of stuff.
Ah,
It's like, So it's, this stuff is mainstream now on
Yeah.
a level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny. I have these uh, shamrock plants that my grandmother always associated with shamrocks because she was Irish, and I got this here in the U.S. at St. Patrick's. They'll be at the grocery store. You can get your little shamrock plant, and I was like, I don't want to do plants again. They're just like, it's too much responsibility. I can't deal with it. And I got this little, shamrock plant, and now it's been, I don't know, 7 years. Now it's two gigantic shamrock plants. And all I do is I'm just continually like, ah, I love my grandmother. And I say that to the plant. It's just
There you
this,
go.
it's the vibe of the love, which we can choose to be in
Yeah,
when we want to.
absolutely.
How do you think, and this is a little, I'm sure you deal with people that have had, really rough trauma. Maybe that's
Hmm.
not who you think you're going to deal with because you're dealing more with professionals or something, but everybody seems to have had that. Is there a particular way you're thinking about how to get, or even just the sadness of the pandemic and some of the things we've had to face? Is there any way that you're thinking about that now as here's how I approach that?
It's a really great question. It's funny actually because a lot of those people that I work with, even the hardcore professionals, they experience very deep trauma. And actually, a lot of the, I do shamanic and karmic healing work, and have gone in very deep with people, including around kind of, even, you know, early childhood sexual abuse
Yes.
trauma, that kind of thing. Um, what occurs to me is, as human beings, we can either break down or break through.
Yeah.
And most of the time, because we don't like change, we tend to have to break down first and go, oh crap, and then we break through, right?
Hmm.
And so for me, there is this kind of collective trauma, and this, the pandemic's part of it, but actually, it's only part of it. It's like this polarization that's happening in society,
Yeah.
which for me is actually the symptom of the trauma, if you
Yeah.
like. Um,
Oh, yeah, very good. Yes, I
you
agree.
know, so for us to do what we're going to do around the climate, or really just to evolve as a species in relation to our global, more than human community. So
Hmm.
the flora, the
Hmm.
fauna, that kind of thing, and not just destroy this planet. We're going to need to evolve. We're going to need to shift consciousness,
Yeah.
and generally dividing lines get even more divided before a shift for me,
Yeah.
or at
Yeah.
least that's what I'd say. So there's going to be conflicts. There's going to be stuff coming up. The next few years I don't think are going to be, you know, happy-go-lucky, as it
Smooth.
were.
Right. Right. They're going to be bumpy. Yeah.
Yeah, because we are, as human beings, even when we've got, people at the climate summit last week saying, "Come on, please change," and as
Hmm.
human beings we don't,
Hmm.
because it's too
Hmm.
uncomfortable. It's like, we're going to be gently, or not so gently, pushed down this path of, right, come on, got to change now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and that's,
But at least the miracle of the conversation is happening,
oh
whereas,
God, absolutely.
20 years ago even there no, I mean some people were, but in the general mainstream there wasn't even the conversation. So, and
No,
this is true of
absolutely.
lots of things actually, the expansion, um, and you're right, it's like fight, 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 expand, fight, fight, fight,
Right.
expand. So we're on the way. It's just not
Yeah,
simple
yeah,
yet. Yeah.
absolutely. There has to be that kind of, you know, it's an old cliche, but when there's that fighting and that kind of thing, there is that sparky energy that tends to be creative energy, and that for
Yeah.
me is what creates the expansion. And one of the things that has come out of the pandemic is so many people, because their regular lives have been disrupted. There are so many people kind of going, well, hold on, it is a wake
Right.
up. You know,
Right.
is this what I want? You know, is this what I want to do with my life? And you know, we're hearing about the I think it's a phenomenon in the US, the Great Resignation,
Yes.
where
Yes.
so many people are just resigning from their day jobs because like I don't want to do this.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't want to be in this reality when there are all these other
Yeah,
reality possibilities available. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So
Yeah.
it's a fascinating time in our evolution, I think.
Absolutely. Um, is there anything else you'd like to say to anybody listening? Or I think it's funny that you said about meeting their partner at the bakery at 3, because probably for somebody listening, that exact thing is gonna happen. We don't know who it is, but
It'll
so
probably be true, won't it?
so
Absolutely,
please,
absolutely.
if it's anybody listening, please email and let us know it was you. But yeah, because these things, they're not random, like that is going to
No.
be the case for somebody. So
Oh, undoubtedly, undoubtedly. I
yes.
think the thing I would say is like look, this referencing the time in history. And it's one of the things I'm seeing with people that I am kind of seeing both as reading clients or healing clients and coaching clients is it is a time of waking up, and that mission driven thing I was talking about. It's like we're gonna go through some some tumultuous times is what the way I put it. And so for those out there that are feeling mission driven or feeling like, oh, I think there's something bigger I'm here for, it's like it is the time to grab hold of that. It is
Yeah.
there are so many people, so many great people acting as guides out there and all that kind of. We have to discern who they are because not all of them are great,
Hmm.
but there's so many good people doing this kind of work that
Yes.
it is the time. Now is the time. It's like everyone is needed,
Yes.
you know. And
To
so,
yeah, I absolutely agree. Everyone is needed to contribute whatever their best way of contributing is. And yeah,
yes,
absolutely.
absolutely. And everyone has greatness in them. They just
Hmm.
need to know that. And once they can get that, they can start to own it. And that, God, what a world it would be if we all brought our greatness together, right? And this
Yeah.
interdependent web of life we would live in would be, I mean,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're getting there slowly, slowly but
yeah,
surely.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely.
Well, Krish, I want to thank you so much for your time,
Oh,
and I will
thank
put your
you.
contact information below so folks can find it. But anyway, it's a great honor to speak with you, and thank you for your time today.
Oh, thank you so much as well. It's been an honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Let's see.